Fix it or we pull the funding. You have 48 hours. The phone went dead. Leo Heron stared at the receiver like it might offer mercy. It didn't. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of the best engineer's money could buy staring at code that refused to cooperate. 3 weeks of watching his dream company bleed clients, credibility, and cash. Then, in the back of the operations room, a 12-year-old boy pointed at a screen and whispered something to an engineer. The typing started frantic, urgent. 30 seconds later, every monitor in the building lit up green. The system was alive. The crisis was over. And nobody could explain how a child with zero coding experience had just solved what MIT graduates couldn't crack in 500 hours. This is the story of Toby Chun, the cafeteria worker's son who saved a Silicon Valley company with nothing but a puzzle book education and a kind of clear sight that only comes from not knowing what's supposed to be impossible. If you've ever been told you're too young, too inexperienced, or not qualified enough to have a valuable opinion, this story is for you. Hit that like button, because what you're about to hear will change how you see expertise forever. Orion Tech Solutions occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in Mountain View, California. The year was 2003, and every startup in Silicon Valley was chasing the same dream: build something revolutionary, get acquired, retire at 35. Leo Heron's version of that dream was elegant. Create email security software that could detect breaches before they happened. Predictive protection. The holy grail of cybersecurity. For 18 months, it worked beautifully. Demo after demo, client after client. Companies were lining up. Venture capital firms were circling. Leo had mortgaged his house, maxed out 4 credit cards, and convinced 12 brilliant engineers to take pay cuts for equity. They believed in the vision. They believed in him. Then the software froze. Not crashed. Not glitched. Froze. Locked up completely during a routine security scan for their biggest client, a financial services firm processing millions of transactions daily. The system detected a threat that didn't exist and spent 48 hours trying to resolve a phantom problem, bringing the client's entire email infrastructure to a standstill. The client pulled their contract. Then 3 more followed. Word spreads fast in tech circles, especially bad word. 3 weeks later, Leo was sitting in an office that looked like a disaster zone. Pizza boxes stacked in corners. Energy drink cans forming small aluminum pyramids. Whiteboards covering equations that led nowhere. His team had been debugging around the clock, sleeping in the office, showering at the gym next door, living on caffeine and desperation. They brought in consultants, specialists who charged $800 an hour to tell them what they already knew. Something in the core algorithm was creating an infinite loop. The system was checking itself to death, but they couldn't find where or why. The investors had been patient, then concerned. Now they were done. 48 hours to fix it, or they'd liquidate the company and salvage what they could from the wreckage. Leo stood at the window, watching the sunset paint the parking lot gold. Beautiful. Irrelevant. In 2 days, this would all be over. The dream he'd built, the team he'd assembled, the technology that was supposed to change everything, gone. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. They'd created software designed to catch threats, and it was being killed by a threat they couldn't catch. Somewhere behind him, Marcus, his senior engineer and best friend, said quietly, "We've checked everything 3 times, Leo. If it's there, it's invisible." Comment below if you've ever felt like giving up right before a breakthrough, because what happens next proves that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. The community open house was Leo's idea, though calling it an idea was generous. It was a distraction, a way to pretend the company was healthy enough to engage with the public while secretly bleeding out in the back rooms. Show some goodwill. Let local families tour a real tech company. Maybe generate some positive PR before the obituary hit TechCrunch. Maria Chen had worked in Orion Tech's cafeteria for 2 years. She prepared the sandwiches nobody ate during lunch meetings, brewed the coffee that fueled midnight debugging sessions, cleaned up after engineers too focused on code to notice where their trash landed. She was quiet, efficient, and functionally invisible, exactly how Silicon Valley preferred its service workers. She brought her son because childcare was expensive and the flyer said family-friendly. Toby was 12, small for his age, with glasses he constantly pushed up his nose and a worn backpack that never left his shoulder. Inside that backpack, 3 puzzle books, a mechanical pencil, and a Rubik's Cube solved so many times the stickers were peeling. The lobby was full of excited families. Kids pressing faces against glass walls, pointing at server racks like they were aquarium exhibits. Parents asking engineers questions about innovation and disruption. Words that sounded important even when nobody quite knew what they meant. Leo worked the room with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Shaking hands. Answering questions. Pretending his world wasn't ending in 43 hours. Toby wasn't interested in the tour. He'd been here before, sitting in the cafeteria after school while his mother finished her shift. He knew the lobby. What interested him was the noise coming from the back. Raised voices, the rapid clicking of keyboards, tension thick enough to feel from 20 feet away. He drifted toward it while the adults networked, and the other kids crowded around a 3D printer demonstration. The operations room was chaos given form. 6 engineers hunched over monitors, each running different diagnostic tests. Code scrolled past faster than any normal person could read. Error logs filled screens with red text that seemed to mock their efforts. Someone was arguing about recursive functions. Someone else was defending their module design. Nobody was agreeing on anything. Toby stood in the doorway, watching, not the people, the screens, the patterns, the way certain sequences repeated, the rhythm of it, like watching water flow over rocks. There was something almost musical about it, if you knew how to listen. The senior engineer, Marcus, noticed him first. "Hey, kid, this area is restricted." Leo turned from where he'd been staring at a whiteboard covered in failed theories. Saw Toby standing there, small and quiet, backpack hanging off one shoulder. For a moment, Leo felt the absurdity of it all. 12 years of building expertise, millions of dollars in funding, and here they were, stumped by code while a child watched from the doorway. "Sorry, buddy," Leo said, walking over. "This stuff's pretty boring anyway. Let's get you back to. Can I just look at the pattern?" The word stopped Leo mid-gesture. Something about the way Toby said it. Not the code or the program. The pattern. Marcus laughed, not unkindly. "Pattern? Kid, this is advanced algorithmic architecture. It's not really something you can just 1 minute?" Toby's voice was soft but insistent. "I won't touch anything." Leo looked at the clock. 43 hours until execution. 500 hours already wasted. What was 1 more minute in the face of total failure? 1 minute, he said. Toby stepped into the room like he was entering a library, careful, respectful of the space. He moved to the nearest monitor, the one displaying the core security algorithm. Layer upon layer of nested functions, conditional statements, data validation checks. The kind of code that takes years to learn how to read. He didn't try to read it. Instead, his eyes tracked the structure, the indentation, the way certain sections began and ended. He wasn't parsing syntax. He was seeing shapes, watching how the pieces fit together, looking for breaks in rhythm. 30 seconds passed. Engineers exchanged glances. A couple smiled, the kind of smile adults give when children are being earnestly wrong about something. It was sweet, really. The kid, trying to help. 45 seconds. Leo checked his watch, already forming the gentle words he'd use to thank Toby and guide him back to tour. The kid meant well. That was worth something, even if... There. Toby's finger touched the screen. Middle section, maybe 200 lines deep into the algorithm. That part repeats. Like, it keeps going back to itself. Marcus leaned over, more to humor the kid than anything else. Glance at where Toby was pointing. That's just a standard loop command, buddy. It's supposed to repeat. That's how we check for her. But it doesn't stop. Toby traced a path with his finger. See? It goes here, checks this, then comes back. Then goes here again, then back again. Forever. The room went very quiet. Marcus pulled up a chair, suddenly interested. Opened the code architecture map, a visual representation of how different functions called each other. Started tracing the pathway Toby had indicated. His expression changed. eyebrows drawing together, mouth opening slightly. Wait. His voice had gone flat. That's not. Leo, come look at this. Leo crossed the room in 3 steps, stared at the screen. The loop Toby had identified was part of the threat validation protocol. It was supposed to check suspicious activity, verify it against known patterns, then either flag it or dismiss it and move on. Standard procedure. They'd written it in the first month of development, but they're buried in Layer 7 of the security protocol, a place they checked early and then dismissed as stable, was a misplaced semicolon, 1 character, a single punctuation mark in the wrong location. It created a condition where the validation function never received a signal to terminate. Instead, it kept checking, kept validating, kept running the same analysis over and over, waiting for confirmation that would never come. An infinite loop hidden inside a legitimate function. The system wasn't broken. It was stuck, like a record skipping on the same groove forever. If you think you know where this is going, drop a comment. Because what happens next shocked everyone in that room, including the people who've been staring at this code for 3 weeks straight. Marcus was already typing, pulling up the function's execution log, scrolling through thousands of entries. And there it was, the same validation check running hundreds of times per second, consuming processing power, blocking other functions, creating a cascade failure that locked up the entire system. Oh my God. His whisper carried weight. He's right. He's completely right. The room erupted. Test it. Pull up the sandbox environment. Someone call the debugging team. Engineers swarmed the workstation, fingers flying over keyboards, code compiling, tests running. The energy had shifted from exhausted resignation to frantic hope in the space of 10 seconds. Toby stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed by the chaos he created. He bumped into Leo, who was standing very still, staring at the screen like it might disappear if he blinked. Leo knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the kid. Toby, right? Your mom works in the cafeteria. Toby nodded, pushing his glasses up. How did you see that? We've had 6 engineers with advanced degrees staring at this code for 500 hours. How did you spot it in under a minute? Toby's answer was so simple it hurt. It looked like the puzzles I do. When something repeats wrong, you find where the pattern starts looping back on itself. Then you find what's making it go back instead of moving forward. Puzzle books. A 12-year-old had saved a multi-million-dollar tech company because he spent his free time doing logic puzzles from the grocery store checkout line. Compiling complete, someone shouted. Running diagnostic now. The room held its breath. On the main monitor, test data began flowing through the system. The security protocol activated, scanning for threats, finding them, validating them, and then green lights. Every monitor, every function, every protocol. The validation function checked once, received its termination signal, and moved on, just like it was supposed to, just like it would have if someone had put a semicolon in the right place 18 months ago. System online. Data flowing clean. Response time nominal. Alerts working. Everything working. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Marcus started laughing. Not a chuckle. A full, gasping, slightly unhinged laugh that comes from 3 weeks of stress releasing all at once. Someone else joined in. Then another. Soon the whole room was laughing or crying or both. Engineers hugging each other, high-fiving, shouting updates to the team members who weren't in the room. Leo stood up slowly, pulled out his phone, and dialed. The investor picked up on the first ring. It's fixed, Leo said. The system's operational. We found the bug. Silence on the other end. Then you're certain? Running full diagnostics right now. Everything's green. We can have the client back online by tomorrow morning. Another pause. I'll make some calls. If this holds, we'll honor the original funding terms. Leo ended the call and looked down at Toby, who was trying very hard to become invisible again, uncomfortable with all the attention. You just saved 12 people's jobs, Leo said quietly, including mine. Do you understand that? Toby shrugged. I just saw the pattern. Pause and comment right now. What would you have done if you were Leo in this moment? Because his response to Toby changes everything that comes next. The next morning, Leo called Maria into his office. She came expecting the worst. Had Toby broken something? Interrupted important work? She was already apologizing before Leo could speak. Maria, stop. He gestured to a chair. Sit, please. She sat, hands folded in her lap, ready to absorb whatever was coming. Your son saved this company yesterday. Leo said it simply, like he was commenting on the weather. The bug that's been killing us for 3 weeks? Toby found it in less than a minute. Maria blinked. I don't what? I'm setting up a scholarship fund for his education. Computer science, engineering, whatever he wants to study. Full ride. And I'm listing him as a consulting contributor in our next investor report. Sir, I can't. Yes, you can. And you will. Because what Toby did yesterday wasn't luck. It was skill. Different skill than what my engineers have. But skill nonetheless. Pattern recognition. Logical thinking. The ability to see what doesn't belong. That's worth investing in. The story hit tech forums by that afternoon. Someone had leaked it. Probably one of the engineers. Still buzzing from the breakthrough. 12-year-old solved Silicon Valley's worst debugging nightmare, read one headline. Kid with puzzle books outsmarts MIT grads, read another. By the next day, it was on actual news sites. The narrative was irresistible. Struggling startup saved by an unlikely hero. The underdog story that tech culture loved to tell itself, even while actively creating systems that crushed underdogs. The client came back. Then 2 more. Investors who'd been ready to walk suddenly saw Orion Tech as a company smart enough to recognize genius, wherever it came from. Good PR in an industry increasingly criticized for its lack of diversity and accessibility. But the most important response came from within the company itself. The engineers had a choice. They could be embarrassed that a kid had shown them up, or they could learn from it. Marcus chose to learn. He pulled Toby aside during the next open house, which became a regular thing after publicity, and said something that stuck with the kid for years. You taught me that sometimes expertise makes you blind. We were so deep in the technical details that we stopped seeing the basics. You reminded me that the best debugging tool isn't knowledge, it's fresh eyes. Orion Tech stabilized over the next 6 months. The security software became an industry standard. Leo eventually sold the company for enough money to retire comfortably, but he didn't. Instead, he started a foundation focused on identifying and nurturing unconventional talent. Kids like Toby whose brilliance didn't fit traditional academic molds. Toby grew up with Leo as a mentor, learned actual coding, but never lost that fundamental skill. Seeing patterns, recognizing what doesn't belong, finding the place where the logic breaks down. By the time he was 25, he was working as a quality assurance specialist for a major tech firm, finding bugs that everyone else missed. The puzzle books stayed in his backpack. He still worked through them during lunch breaks, keeping that particular part of his brain sharp, because he understood something most people never learn. Skills are transferable. The thinking that solves a crossword puzzle can debug code. The spatial reasoning that completes a jigsaw can design better interfaces. The pattern recognition that wins at Sudoku can catch security flaws. Years later, during an interview for a tech podcast, someone asked Toby what he remembered most about that day. Everyone was looking so hard, he said. Like if they just looked harder, they'd find it. But sometimes looking harder just means you're staring at the same wrong thing longer. I wasn't looking hard. I was just looking different. Maria never left Orion Tech's cafeteria. Not because she had to stay, but because she wanted to. She liked the work, liked the people, and she liked walking past the main conference room where Leo had framed something on the wall, a page from one of Toby's old puzzle books, the one he'd been working on the day he saved the company. Underneath it, a plaque. Sometimes the solution is simpler than the problem. Stay curious. Stay humble. That misplaced semicolon, one character out of millions, became legendary in tech circles. A cautionary tale about the dangers of assumption. A reminder that complexity isn't always sophistication. And sometimes the bugs that kill you are the ones hiding in the code you thought was too basic to recheck. But more than that, it became a story about sight. About who we see and who we overlook. About the difference between credentials and capability. about the kind of intelligence that doesn't announce itself with degrees, but proves itself with results. Here's the uncomfortable truth this story forces us to face. Expertise can become a prison. You spend years learning the right way to think about problems, the proper methodologies, the accepted frameworks, the industry best practices, and slowly, without realizing it, you stop questioning the basics. You assume that if something were wrong in the foundation, you would have caught it already. You move past it, looking for more complex explanations because complex problems deserve complex solutions, right? Wrong. Sometimes the answer is simple. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's so fundamental that your trained mind skips right over it because you've been conditioned to look for deeper issues. Toby didn't have that training. He didn't know what he was supposed to see or where bugs typically hide. He just looked at the pattern and noticed what didn't fit. Pure observation without the filter of expectation. This is the power of fresh perspectives. Not because outsiders are smarter. They're not. But because they're different. They see through uncorrupted eyes. They ask the dumb questions that turn out to be brilliant. They challenge assumptions that have calcified into invisible laws. Every breakthrough in human history came from someone who saw what others missed, usually because they weren't trained to ignore it. Einstein was a patent clerk. The Wright brothers were bicycle mechanics. Steve Jobs dropped out of college. Not because credentials don't matter, they do, but because credentials aren't the only thing that matters. Pattern recognition is a universal skill. It shows up everywhere, hiding in activities we dismiss as hobbies or games or ways to kill time. Toby's puzzle books taught him to see logical structures, identify repetitions, spot breaks in sequence. Those are the exact skills needed for debugging, but they're also the skills needed for data analysis, strategic planning, system design, and a dozen other serious professional fields. What useless skill are you carrying around right now that's actually genius in disguise? What hobby have you been told is a waste of time that's actually training your brain for something valuable? What perspective do you have that the experts don't, simply because you're looking from a different angle? The dangerous assumptions we make. That age equals wisdom, that credentials equal capability, that formal training can't be challenged, that expensive consultants no more than observant outsiders, that expertise and insight are the same thing. They're not. Expertise is accumulated knowledge. Insight is the ability to see what that knowledge is missing. Leo learned this lesson the expensive way. Nearly lost everything before a 12-year-old taught him that intelligence doesn't always wear a suit or carry a diploma. The best organizations, the smartest leaders, the most innovative teams. They're the ones who create space for voices that don't sound like everyone else's. Who listen when the intern asks a basic question? Who takes seriously the observation from someone without the right background? Because here's what Orion Tech discovered. The cost of being too smart to listen is infinitely higher than any bug could ever be. The semicolon that nearly destroyed a company. The puzzle book that saved it. The child who saw what MIT graduates couldn't. This isn't a story about coding. It's a story about humility. About recognizing that brilliance doesn't ask for permission before showing up. About understanding that the person you're dismissing right now might be the one who saves you later. Who are you underestimating? The kid with the weird hobby. The person without the degree who sees things differently. The outsider asking questions that make you uncomfortable. The voice that doesn't sound like authority but might be speaking truth anyway. Leo kept one of Toby's puzzle books in his desk drawer as a reminder. On hard days, when problems seemed insurmountable, he'd pull it out and work through a few logic puzzles. Not because they helped him think better, but because they helped him remember. Solutions come from unexpected places. And the smartest thing you can do is stay curious about where you're not looking. If this story opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered, hit that like button. Share this with someone who's been underestimated, or someone who needs to stop underestimating others. Subscribe to Living While Black and Beyond for more stories that prove genius doesn't follow a script and intelligence doesn't need permission to matter. And comment below. What skill do you have that everyone thinks is useless, but might actually be your secret superpower? Thank you for being here, for being part of this community where we dig into stories that challenge how we see the world and the people in it. where we recognize that the most powerful moments often happen when we stop assuming we already know everything worth knowing. Your comments, your experiences, the stories you share in the discussion, they matter. They add layers to these narratives. They prove that Toby's story isn't unique. It's universal. We've all been underestimated. We've all underestimated someone else. And we're all carrying hidden brilliance that's waiting for the right moment to prove itself. Next week, I'm bringing you the story of a grandmother who walked into a tech conference and taught programmers about efficiency using lessons she learned running a restaurant kitchen for 40 years. The collision between her world and theirs? You won't believe what it revealed about who actually understands systems thinking. Until then, remember this. Your age doesn't define your value. Your background doesn't limit your vision. And those weird interests you've been told to grow out of, they might be exactly what the world needs you to bring to the table. Stay curious, stay open, and never let anyone convince you that expertise and insight are the same thing. Because the next breakthrough in your life, your work, your community might come from the most unexpected mind in the room, including yours.